Wish you could become a morning person? You know the type, up before the sun, early morning runs, first one to the office with donuts and a smile. How do they do it? Easy. With the new Galaxy Watch 8, sleep tracking and personalized insights from Samsung Health help you improve so you can wake up to a whole new you. One who, dare I say it, skips the snooze? It's possible. Train your sleep with Galaxy Watch 8. Learn more at Samsung.com. Requires compatible Samsung Galaxy phone, Samsung Health app, and Samsung account.
Although I'm a working man, I can bring the guns.
So I'm just walking in to conference on the day of Starmer's speech. The music being blared out is from Steve Bray and the Sodom people protesting against Brexit as we all make our way through security. Just wanted to give you a little bit of the flavour of just how noisy Labour conference can be.
Welcome to Quiet Riot, a politics podcast that aims to be more chocolate box than soap box. I'm Andreou.
And I'm Kenny Campbell, here to help you pick out the last Snickers from a box full of political bounty bars.
So unwrap your choc of choice, flick the wrapper at the cat,
Meow.
and melt lovingly into another Quiet Riot. Hello and welcome to Quiet Riot. I'm Alex.
And I'm Kenny, filling in from Naomi, who, as you've just heard at the top, has been hanging out with Labour hoi polloi in Liverpool this week. More from there in a bit.
Today, of course, we'll be looking at the Labour conference, generally Keir Starmer's speech specifically, and what appears to be a significant shift of political strategy in both tone and content.
We'll also be looking at the recent election result in Moldova and the shift of White House stance on Ukraine to ask whether they contain hints that Putin's sphere of influence may be shrinking.
To help us navigate these stormy waters, we welcome back a Quiet Riot favourite, journalist, broadcaster and Kaiserin of narrowboats. It's Annette Dittert. Welcome back, Annette.
Thank you so much for having me.
How are you doing? How are you feeling?
I'm doing very well.
You're very busy at the moment,
I'm
aren't
very
you?
busy with all kind of projects, but the weather is good and my narrowboat is dry and warm. Which always,
Kenny was curious about that.
I was, because this is the time of year traditionally when people start to say to you, how do you cope with the cold in a narrowboat? And then you look at them like pleadingly because they don't know. But is it easier to keep a narrowboat warm in winter or cold in summer?
Yeah, the first. In summer, especially this summer, it was really tough because you sit there like a fish in a tin box and you get just fried. There's nothing you can do because it's
like a bain-marie.
Steel just starts to cook when the sun is on it all day. Whereas in winter, I mean, I have to tell you a little secret. I have underfloor heating. So
On a boat?
Yes.
Okay.
I'm German. I built it myself. So I did some practical additions. They call it the German palace, double-glazed windows. I really have underfloor heating.
Yeah, but I want to come now, basically.
I had a friend who had a narrowboat. They had two, actually. The first one sank. Not so good.
Happens.
But the thing with canals is they don't sink very far.
No.
But they got very wet. But they built a second one.
Thanks for that.
That's good.
Thanks for that brief lesson in physics.
Never assume the level of intelligence of the general public. But the second narrowboat, they had a little pot-belly stove.
Yeah.
And in the winter when it was going, the stove glowed red.
Yes.
It was literally red hot, this damn thing.
Yeah.
And if all goes wrong, you can just sink another boat and you're not going to burn to death at least.
I mean, I have a stove as well. You really need that in winter. The real problem in winter is that you get a lot of condensed water when it's cold outside and warm in the boat because you look at me like,
No,
I'm not going to go into details. It's complicated.
No, I'm fascinated.
But it
because I was
something
very
like
close
a sauna.
to living on one.
Really?
Yeah. When I was looking for a flat, I really, really seriously considered a really big, beautiful narrowboat that I was very, very, very tempted by it, especially because it was right next to Idris Elba's narrowboat at the time.
You should have stayed in a tent quite happily. Where's Alex? He's in a cardboard box next to Idris Elba's boat. Oh, there you go.
But then when it came time to deciding where I put my stuff, because I have all these vinyl LPs.
That is the problem. If you have a lot of things, it's not for you.
No.
Georgia, who looks after us, our advertising partners, Adelicious, who's fabulous. And if you're listening, hello, Georgia. She's got a broad beam. So they do have room for things like LPs and animals.
White beams.
White beams, is that what it is?
Yeah, that's how we call them.
I'd Scotland, big boats.
Maybe that's the Scottish version. They're called white beams.
As you said, Annette, never make assumptions about the level of intelligence of your audience. Anyway.
Last year's Labour conference, a couple of months after their landslide victory, was notable for its borderline funereal atmosphere, and many were predicting that this year was going to be quite a lot worse. With Labour trailing in the polls, Starmer's popularity lower than ever, and talk of a leadership challenge, it wasn't an entirely unreasonable prediction, but it was, nevertheless, a spectacularly wrong one. The mood? Well, it was defiant. Ministers came out fighting, the crowd even cheered. Keir Starmer himself delivered what was hailed by many to be the best speech of his career. Admittedly, not a particularly high bar, that one. And in the end, even that hospital radio DJ, BBC political editor, and man with a side hustle as an Aldi Halloween decoration, that's Chris Mason we're talking about, by the way, he had to admit grudgingly that it had gone better than expected.
But there is a line, a moral line. And it isn't just Farage who crosses it. There are also people who should know better, sowing fear and discord across our country. And then when we call it out, they pretend that we're criticising reasonable concerns about immigration. So let us spell it out once and for all. Controlling migration is a reasonable goal. But if you throw bricks and smash up private property, that's not legitimate, that is thuggery. Free speech is a British value and we have guarded it for centuries. But if you incite racist violence and hatred, that is not expressing concern, it's criminal. And this party, this great party, is proud of our flags. Yet if they're painted alongside graffiti telling a Chinese takeaway owner to go home, that's not pride, that's racism.
The tricky part, well, it comes next. Maintaining that momentum and that sense, finally, of a story being told about the country's future instead of getting derailed by poor choices and inept handling. OK, Alex, your initial reaction to the speech was a pretty positive one. How's it settled since?
I mean, if you take it apart, I have a problem with this sentence and that policy, but in many ways, that's not what leader speeches at conference are about. They are about overall presentation and a sense of story being told, a sense of narrative. And I think those things had been so missing from the Labour offering that it was really notable when they were there. I felt actually that in many ways Starmer was reaching over the head of the political commentators and the MPs in the room and talking directly to the public, which is not an easy thing to do. I don't know how many of the public are receptive to it or even listening. But the point is that the tone of the speech was one that spoke to the country rather than to the room or to the papers. Given how difficult a position the government is in, given the mistakes it's made so far, given Starmer's limitations as an orator, I really cannot think of a single way it could have gone better than it did. It really ticked every box that they would have wanted to tick, I think. Here's Naomi's reaction from the conference, by the way.
Hi guys, Naomi here again. I've just come out of listening to Starmer's speech. And I think the room really, really enjoyed that speech far more than previous years. Obviously, all of the stuff about anti-racism, about not being British if your skin colour isn't right, if you're from a mixed race family, is, absolute racism. The rejection of Farage went down so superbly. Flag waving of the audience, probably not so much. And poor old Northern Ireland, obviously it was just a bit too tricky to decide which flag to go for with that one. So I just feel a little bit sorry for them. I think the jokes landed relatively well, but generally the atmosphere here is extremely relieved that they are no longer going to be aping reform, but actually taking the fight to them and denouncing their politics of division and intolerance and disunity. My own personal perspective is, while I agreed with a lot of the content and was pleased to hear it, largely because I think it signals a direction of travel change from the one that they had been on. So I think the direction of travel is now better. It wasn't so much the content as the delivery. This was Starmer doing much better at delivering a speech, and it felt that he was authentic, and I think he was able to deliver it so much better and more eloquently and charismatically than he has done previous speeches, because he was saying stuff he actually believes. He believed a lot of what he was saying today, and that came through, and there was an energy and a buzz that he was able to create from that we have not seen from this Prime Minister for a really long time.
What did you think, Annette?
I also think it was by far his best speech he gave, especially the second half. The first half was a bit like, took a while to
Plodding, yeah.
There was a lot of people who wanted to get their stuff in, who work with him. That was my impression. But I was really relieved to hear him calling out Farage's policy for what it is, as clearly racist. And I'm wondering where this will go now after this has, I've sort of thought about it for a day. I mean, the big danger in this will be whether Farage and partly the press like the Daily Mail, who's now openly supporting him, whether they will be able to say, Starmer called you, the voters, racist. That's the danger, I think, here. Although Starmer studiously tried to not do that, and he didn't. But this will be, I think Farage and co will try to distort it that way. And that might backfire then, because I've understood one thing. If you tell somebody he's racist or you try to push him into a corner, Brits are very stubborn and they will do it even more.
Yeah.
So I think that's a real danger, although he really, really tried to make it clear that that's not what he meant. But that's something that will be a problem, I think, potentially. And then the other question I have, I was asking myself this morning when I woke up and thought about it again. I've just been up north a lot, in Burnley, in Blackpool, in Barrow, in the northwest mostly. And I was really, although I knew that would happen, but I was really, really flabbergasted by the amount of anger, disappointment and outright fury I encountered with lifelong Labour voters who almost shouted at me when I asked about Starmer. And every single one, I've really met only 2 or 3 out of, this is purely anecdotal, obviously, but out of maybe 80, 100 people I've talked to over 10 days, I've met maybe 2 or 3 who had some kind of understanding for the mess this government is. Everybody else said, I've voted for Labour all my life, never again. Really, I was like, wow.
And what's around what issue?
It's mostly about Labour having trashed its own brand. The winter fuel thing is still a big topic. Most MPs will know that.
That's interesting.
Yeah, because that was the first time. That was the first big policy they announced, and that has really cut through. And it still comes up in every second discussion. And the second big topic that I encountered was the two-child benefit cap, which is perceived as something extremely cruel, which it is, I think. I don't know of any other European country who has done that. If you take it literally, this was just telling poor people not to have so many kids.
Yeah.
Anyway, so I think there was a big expectation that this would be scrapped straight away, and it wasn't. And they haven't touched on that at conference because they need to figure out how to do that. I think there
are strong briefings
yes,
now that it's going.
But still, the question is that too little too late? Because the main impression I got is that lifelong Labour voters just feel betrayed. And they don't feel it's their party anymore, and they don't feel it's a party who is on our side. But on the contrary, the sentence I heard most often was, they take it out on us now, they take it out on the poor, because that's the easiest way for them.
That's a key point that I'm taking away from what's happened and what is going to happen before the end of the year with child benefit in particular, in that they've backed themselves into a corner. If they don't remove the cap, the core voters will despise them and they'll get kicked from pillar to post. If they do a U-turn, they're weak.
I mean, sometimes U-turns are about weakness. I don't think this one will be. But certainly they won't get credit for it because it will be you were forced to do it.
Yeah, exactly.
We made you do it. If we had let you get away with it, you would have quite happily continued with this.
I mean, it's an interesting
policy.
point that because you both agreed very much on the idea that Starmer's speech this week was probably his best one. And just in the interest of not giving him a complete pass, it felt a little bit to me like it was almost a pre-election speech in some ways. So this is the set of challenges we face, and it's going to be difficult, and we're going to, these are tough times that we're going to face. So, well, you've been in power for over a year now. There should be some focus on good news.
The response to that is that it is a pre-election speech because I think Wales, Scotland and local elections
point,
in urban
yes.
centres coming up are really, really important for Labour.
But it also highlighted the fact that the first year of this government has been a year of probably missed opportunities, some were going to say. So that, yes, what you say is absolutely right. The devolved nations have got elections coming up. But, they've had 12 plus months. There was something missing there.
I mean, he named quite a lot of things, investments that had been made and other things. I mean, I always think the good stuff they're doing that is also happening, but that takes more time, doesn't get any credit because they cannot present it properly.
And also as a function of, I guess, trying to be more responsible than what went on before, they are doing stuff that is slightly more in the long term, which naturally takes more time to filter through, where the pattern before is that a big announcement would be made about something
That's
right now and then actually not happen. But the Johnson government will have already had all the positive press just for announcing it and then no follow-up when it failed to materialize.
Centrist governments or centrist parties being too decent in the digital age, in a way.
I guess so, yeah.
Well, up to a point.
So.
I think Starmer blundered in his interview with Laura Kuenssberg when he used the word racist about the reform policies. Whatever we think about the truth of what he was saying, using a word like racist it's like strapping a landmine to your arse and sitting in a bucking bronco. It will go off and it will kick you up the backside whatever happens. It opened a huge goal. I think that detracted from the core message, from the reset message that he was putting there. Now, a large part of that, of course, is because it's a particularly hostile media environment, but that's no surprise. I thought he got blindsided by that a little bit. That didn't look planned at all.
I do disagree there. I think it was really important that he called these policies out as what they are. They're racist. And there is racism all over. I mean, Farage tries to stoke it up, clearly.
Yeah.
I mean, he does it in a very cynical, very clever way. And I mean, Labour has tried to tiptoe around that all summer to no avail. I mean, they've cut through more and more, and you have had this big demonstration with 150 or 110,000 people following Tommy Robinson. I was there. I mean, that wasn't all racist, but this is infectious if it's suddenly allowed. And I think it was really, really important that Starmer called that out and called it for what it is.
Let's have a listen to that bit of the speech and then Farage's response.
And conference. If you say or imply that people cannot be English or British because of the colour of their skin, that mixed heritage families owe you an explanation, that people who've lived here for generations, raised their children here, built their lives here, working in our schools, our hospitals, running businesses, are our neighbours. If you say they should now be deported, then mark my words, we will fight you with everything we have, because you are the enemy of national renewal.
I am completely shocked at his behaviour. I hope when he wakes up tomorrow morning, he feels ashamed of what he has done. But I'm sorry to say, I now believe that he is unfit to be the Prime Minister of our country.
I think there is a risk for Farage in this as well, which I'm not sure people are fully recognising. There is something about him that goes quite camp when he feels offended. And I don't think it accords with the image he usually tries to portray. And I have the feeling that the more you put him on the defensive, the more you will get this huffy camp Farage that makes him look like the ridiculous figure that he actually is.
He's taking elements of Trumpian response, but he's not talented enough to deliver it with the sort of thickness of Trump's brain coupled with the thinness of Trump's skin.
No, it's more than that. I know what you mean. Trump is also thin-skinned and camp, but reacts like an alpha when offended. it reveals him as dangerous. Nigel Farage offended is revealed as powerless. He goes all posh and pearl clutchy and a little bit Women's Institute.
And also, I think we shouldn't forget that Farage has moved way further to the right than a few months ago over the last month.
Yeah.
I mean, he did throw...
Way
I mean, he
right.
did throw Rupert Lowe out of the party for talking about remigration or deportations. And after this whole Kirk business landed so well in America, he thought he can just go down that road. And I mean, that was quite a surprise. And I'm also wondering whether he didn't make a blunder here.
If you've shopped online, chances are you've bought from a business powered by Shopify. You know that purple Shop Pay button you see at checkout? The one that makes buying so incredibly easy? That's Shopify. And there's a reason so many businesses sell with it, because Shopify makes it incredibly easy to start and run your business. Shopify is the commerce platform behind 10% of all e-commerce in the US. Sign up for your $1 per month trial and start selling today at shopify.com/promo. Go to shopify.com/promo.
Well, it's Naomi here from Liverpool Labour Party conference. I've just left a meeting with the EU ambassador where Yvette Cooper, Stephen Doughty, who's the Europe Minister, and Nick Thomas-Symonds, who's the Minister in charge of our negotiations, all spoke incredibly warmly about the relationship with the EU. And really importantly, actually, loads of MPs went, as in, I think government said, we've got to go and show Europe a lot of love. And that was fresh after Rachel Reeves' speech on various things, including the ambitious youth mobility scheme that she is hoping government pursues with gusto, that Better Britain's been campaigning for years and years. Anyway, I'm rushing now from that to go to another fringe meeting with industry leaders on both Europe, but also really importantly fighting Farage, because they're interested in that too. So anyway, more later. Bye.
Annette, German politicians have had to deal with the AfD, with the sort of far-right party in Germany. We should say they are, well, I don't know now actually, but they were more right-wing than Farage.
They still are.
They probably still are.
They still are. They're
but
way
he's
more
moving
extreme.
in that
Yes,
direction.
he's moving in that
at
direction.
speed. So they've been nudging against these kinds of levels of support for a while now. So how have the mainstream parties dealt with them so far, and has it worked?
No, it hasn't worked so far. I mean, AfD is still more extreme than Farage, I would say. And they are, like we Germans sometimes are, more organized in a way as well. I mean, Reform is still quite a bunch of headless chicken when you look at the MPs, and they're still trying to professionalize themselves. AfD is, in that regard, further ahead the curve. They are really well organized, and they are really strong in the East and also strong in the West. And so far, since we had the general elections beginning of the year, especially the Conservatives have dealt really badly with AfD by pandering to their narratives, by basically making the same mistakes the Tories made with Brexit. I find myself sometimes shouting at the television or at the computer when I see them making exactly the same mistakes I've described like 8 years ago. There is something, especially in centrist conservative parties, where they don't seem to recognize the danger that is in it for them when they pander to the far right. There's almost something, we call it in German, Angstlust, the lust to go somewhere dangerous.
Good word.
And it's a nice word. Yeah, I like it. And that seems to affect a lot of centrist conservative parties. They feel like, oh, this is dangerous territory, but let's try it. And also this kind of toxic chauvinistic thing that is in there seems to be appealing for parts of the centrist conservatives. And we have exactly that problem in Germany at the moment, because Merz, the new chancellor, has dealt with it very badly, basically. The first thing he did during the campaign for the general election was that he put up had a motion they voted on completely unnecessarily, where he said, OK, we will vote on this together with the AfD, just to show that he's open to the far right. He just wanted to try it out.
On border control it was,
on border
wasn't it?
control. It was a motion that would never have been implemented as a bill. It was completely unnecessary. It was just a demonstration how tough he can be. Really naive, really stupid. This led to big demonstrations all over Germany, because it was the first time this so-called firewall against the far right had deliberately been cracked by him. And it led to him probably losing 1%, 2%, 3% in these elections. And it mostly led to the far left winning a lot because they were really leading these demonstrations, which lost him a 2/3 majority for the centrist parties, which has brought the whole system into, the coalition he's forming now into a difficult situation. And meanwhile, what has happened over these last months now is that the AfD is polling stronger than ever. I mean, they are polling around 26, 28%.
Yeah.
And,
I've seen the polls. They're now slightly above Merz on some polls, not on all of them, but on some polls they come even above.
It's just another example. I mean, we have numerous of these examples in history and also in recent history that this strategy, pandering to the far right, doesn't work. And that's why I probably was also so relieved with Starmer changing course now. Interestingly enough, to just paint a picture not too dark, we just had regional elections in the West, in North Rhine-Westphalia, which is sort of the red wall of Germany, where there is another conservative prime minister, regional prime minister, Landesminister. It's a federal system in Germany, so it's a bit different. And he is the opposite of Merz. Hendrik Wüst, he's called. He sort of forms a coalition with the Greens. And these elections went really well for the centrist parties.
That's interesting because the polling I had seen suggested they were going to do badly, but that was national polling that didn't reflect regionally.
No, it didn't because this is a different... And that shows if you stay in the center, if you don't move towards them, it does bring better results. And the AfD didn't win a single mayor in these elections, which they had hoped they would, because this is a very typical, it's the red wall, ex-working class,
industrial,
poor, and that would have been the first region in the West where the AfD could have been really strong, and they didn't. So there is a lesson to be learned there for Merz as well, and I really hope he will. I mean, the next elections in Germany are also far away, but still, I mean, this is really lingering underneath. Yeah, there we are.
Philosophical question. Why do racists hate so much being called racist?
It's a cracking question.
It's a serious question. It just seems to trigger them at a very deep level when, I mean, from all we know privately, they have no problem expressing very, very racist views. And yet if you call them out on it, they just... I don't think it's just performative. I think it genuinely upsets them. Why is that? Why don't they just embrace it and say, yeah, white people power?
I sometimes posit the idea that racism is a bit like almost political pornography. It's something that lots of practitioners enjoy when they are by themselves or when they're with like-minded people, you know? We all know where we're coming from, as it were. But just like pornography, if you start to enjoy it in public... all of a sudden, awkward questions will start to arise.
I feel we're learning more about you in this than about the issue.
I mean, I think it's mostly because racist is still really negatively connotated.
Yeah, it is a taboo, though. It does betray that it's a taboo.
And that's why nobody wants to accept that. I mean, every single person I've asked on this Tommy Robinson March why they're here, the first sentence would always be, I'm not racist,
That's
but.
Right. Yeah.
So it's a taboo and it's a very negative word nobody wants to be associated with.
The last thing I want to touch on, I mean, it's depressingly predictable. The media's mission in the last 24 hours has become to ask, it seems, every single Labour delegate, MP, minister at the conference several times whether they think Nigel Farage and by extension Reform voters are racist, time after time, until someone says something wrong that they can run with. Annette, you have spent much of your career at a state broadcaster. What is your assessment of how politics is being covered at the moment generally, but also more specifically by the BBC? Because I never know if it's my bias speaking or if...
I think it's always a bit difficult to say the BBC or the public broadcasters because there's so many different journalists working in so many different outlets.
And sometimes, local radio will ask the really difficult question.
I had a real problem the way Chris Mason was reporting on the Farage on the Reform Party convention because I felt he was really losing the impartiality that is normally so, trained with them, and nobody would care.
Yeah.
So that was something I found really difficult. He was standing there like a fanboy. I mean, saying, I've never heard this, I've never seen such electricity. I don't know what he said exactly, but I do remember that I was choking on my coffee and thought, what's going on? And these performances seem not to have any consequences. That's something I find difficult, but then very often I think it has to do with them having cut the budget so much that they don't have the researchers, they don't have the people anymore who can do the research in a way that a presenter can really stick to his point. I do also get angry at times when I listen to some of the presenters, and I think there's bias involved. They fail a lot, but I think we have to be careful because public broadcasting is the only thing we have that belongs to us as voters.
Look, I get that, and your caveats are very important, but it feels to me like there's a generation of journalists promoted at the BBC at the moment who are more interested in getting their rocks off on something that is fun and controversial and will get them attention than actually the mission of the BBC. Even with decent journalists like Vicky Young. I think Vicky Young is good. I think, Victoria Derbyshire is very good. But they begin from the headline they want to get to, but they don't listen. There may be bigger stories, bigger threads that the person you're interviewing is letting loose that you might pull at if you're paying attention. But they don't listen. They let the person talk for a length of time that they consider acceptable and then go back in with what their agenda is. And the whole point of funding the BBC in the way you fund the BBC is so they don't have to do that. They can afford to have a real conversation with a politician and actually get to some information that maybe other interviewers who are looking for clicks and advertisers cannot get to. But at the moment, they're doing exactly the same thing that anyone else would do. And that, to me, is letting down their mission.
That's an interesting point because journalism was my profession. I don't think that many journalists actually achieve that level. And I don't think in my lifetime it's ever been the case that they have. Brian Malden, who was really very, very good indeed at doing what you described, listening for opportunities, not listening for soundbites, but listening for opportunities, always trying to answer the question why as well. What is the point? Why is this the policy? So first of all, I don't think that we've lost the golden age. I don't think it was ever a golden age. I think the very best have always been the very best because they're unusual. Secondly, I think the BBC faces a huge challenge, not just because of resources, but also because political news has become incredibly Americanized. Okay, so the balance of political news in this country now, thanks in no small part to Donald Trump.
My theory is the drag queen theory. Bear with me. When someone is a Shirley Bassey impersonator or a Margaret Thatcher impersonator, right? They will not impersonate Shirley Bassey at the peak of her powers, at her vocal best, or Margaret Thatcher. They will impersonate the sort of slightly more caricaturist person that they became, because it's easier. It gives you a bigger target to aim for. Yeah. And so my impression is that a lot of people are Jeremy Paxman impersonators. He has become somehow the figure in their head that represents what a good interviewer does. But instead of going for Jeremy Paxman at his peak, they're going for Jeremy Paxman when he had become a caricature of himself. And they need to break out of that pattern. They need to talk and listen. And I find so few of them listen. If you went up to Laura Kuenssberg in the middle of a segment and said to her, "What did she just tell you?" she would have not a fucking clue. She's looking down her list at what point she's going to move on next.
But I think apart from the BBC, if I look at the British media in general, the papers are the bigger problem. And the BBC, and that's something I would really accuse them of, is repeating that by reading them out every morning.
The Daily Mail. Every single Today programme.
The Daily Express. I mean, it's completely biased. They really do, make them bigger that way. And they do follow a very biased line, pretending they're just reading the morning news.
So call to action, complaining to the BBC, I think just elicits a stock answer, and Ofcom is just a useless instrument. So here's my question, not really a call to action, but a question. How about a boycott of one of the products that they can feel? What if a mass of people unsubscribed and unfollowed from Newscast, which is the Laura Kuenssberg, Chris Mason product? They can see that on their stats.
You want to do a Kimmel?
To send a message. Yeah, absolutely. Because, that's ultimately the only thing they pay attention to.
Yeah.
At Blinds.com, it's not just about window treatments. It's about you, your style, your space, your way. Whether you DIY or want the pros to handle it all, you'll have the confidence of knowing it's done right. From free expert design help to our 100% satisfaction guarantee, everything we do is made to fit your life and your windows. Because at Blinds.com, the only thing we treat better than windows is you. Visit Blinds.com now for up to 50% off primetime deals and free professional installation. Rules and restrictions apply.
Okay, listeners, look, we know you've missed this little segment from the last few shows, and so, back with a politically correct pop, it's that bit where we dig around to find ill-apportioned outrage and mean-spirited misery. Welcome back to Wokey Dokey.
Wokey Dokey.
Alex, it's been too long since the last Wokey Dokey. Was it worth the wait?
I don't know, is the answer. So this is a really confusing one, and I'm hoping that you both can help me. Big Brother started recently again, and a former contestant was not happy about the people that went in the house and published a video about it on TikTok. Let's have a listen.
Woke, Scottish. Woke, Scottish. Woke, Emily Hewitson. Yes. Proud Brit, proud Conservative, proud Christian. That is what this country's all about. And that is what this country should be all about. And it is what we have always been about, up until recently when we've been infiltrated by the woke nonsense.
Just before we dive into this, I have many questions, but only one.
I have even more.
He's a Scottish person. He's clearly a show-busy person. He's the ex-Big Brother contestant. He has got more white teeth in his head than the rest of Scotland put together. Now, none of the
Let's
listeners...
not send him traffic, okay? So, my first question is, why is he playing Ode to Joy? Why is he playing the EU anthem in the background? That I have thought about this a lot and deeply. I don't understand. But next question. Woke, Scottish. Woke, Scottish. Woke, Emily Hewitson. So, is Scottish another variety of woke, or is it not woke?
You mean in general?
What is it he's saying?
Scottish.
That being Scottish is by definition woke, so you need say nothing more, or that it can't be woke?
I think he's quite on the nose with this one. Woke. So there's a bunch of woke things, and then the contrast, Scottish. I think we're being held up as the anti-woke nation.
Right.
At least I hope
Because
that's
one
it.
of the two Scottish people that he describes is a dual nationality Italian woman that describes herself as pansexual. So she doesn't qualify as woke by virtue of being Scottish, if I understand this correctly. But a young, white, Christian Somerset farmer who said he's only been to London twice for the farmers' protests. So he's woke.
Honestly?
As is some blonde influencer from Derry. I mean, if you look at the lineup of contestants, there are some where you can see clearly why the choice has been made, because basically they either have brown skin or they're gay. That's what it comes down to. But there are some really baffling ones that are clearly the opposite of woke in there. And the Scottish ones are quite woke. And then Emily Hewitson, who is a sort of conservative influencer and was voted out first. So,
I think this might be the first Wokey Dokey that we're going to have to ask listeners to do a PhD in.
Any thoughts, Annette?
Actually, you totally lost me here. Because I've just been listening.
You're not alone.
No.
So, I mean, I have to sum it up, don't I?
Good luck.
Usually at the
I
end
think
of the...
you have to, yes.
So I think this week, anything other than Scottish or Emily Hewitson is woke. That's my understanding of the situation.
Well, thank you, Alex.
You're welcome.
That was worth the wait, and I'm bloody exhausted now.
Woke, Scottish. You're both. And now some scarcely believable good news. The pro-European party of Moldovan President Maia Sandu has won a new majority in Moldova's parliament on Sunday, winning over 50% of the vote on the first round, despite what Sandu described as massive Russian interference and pro-Russian opposition leader Igor Dodon claiming victory on 25%.
I mean, he tried.
Surprisingly, even in the Russian-controlled breakaway region of Transnistria, the vote for the pro-European party doubled from the last election to 30%. Meanwhile, in entirely unrelated news, Reform UK's former leader in Wales, Nathan Gill, has admitted taking bungs to make pro-Russian statements as an MEP, pleading guilty to 8 counts of bribery between 6 December 2018 and 18 July 2019. Reform's reaction? Who dat? Let's have a little listen.
This is somebody who preceded my time in the party. I've never spoken to him. In fact, the first time I ever heard his name was in some news reports. This was not a major figure in the party.
In one of the nations of the United Kingdom.
Given he has pleaded guilty, I'm happy to say, obviously, what he's done is appalling and totally unacceptable. And
let me just be fair to you, because you can't necessarily see what's going out on screen. We've just shown our viewers some pictures of Nigel Farage with his arm around him, holding a union flag. They obviously knew one another pretty well.
Well, I don't think, whatever that footage is, Nigel meets tens of thousands of people on an annual basis, ultimately, and he can't be held accountable for the actions of every single person whom he comes into contact with.
Add this to last week's pretty significant change of language on Ukraine from the White House, and one is tempted to ask the question, is Putin beginning to lose his grip? A big question, I know, but let's break it down. Shall we start from where we left the last item, actually? Where exactly is the media coverage on the Nathan Gill story? It feels to me like quite consequential.
I mean, that's the main question I had this week, because this should have been all over the front pages. But it wasn't. I mean, there was some story in the Times, and then the bigger papers were the New York Times and the Brussels Times. I mean, it was really weird, because this is a clear sign because that was 2018 and 2019. It's a clear sign how early Putin started to interfere. I mean, I'm not even starting now the whole Brexit story. I mean, we still haven't seen the Russia report.
We still haven't seen the report.
We still don't really know, and it's pretty sure that he did interfere there as well, because he has started this very, very early on. I mean, as we know, this was a story I thought that should have been covered way more here, especially as Farage, who said, I never met the guy, I mean, there's plenty of pictures, has also been seen with the wife of one of the Russian influencers who has been handing out that money to Gill. So I would suspect, or I would wish, that some investigative journalists in this country would just go and put all these pieces together and go deeper into that story, because I think the Russian connection Farage has, as well as the Trumpian one, is one of his weakest points, because this doesn't go down well here at all, even with Reform voters. I remember like a few months ago, or whenever he tried that, or a year ago, when Farage cautiously tried to say Ukraine was also because Putin was provoked by NATO. Even the Daily Mail slapped him down because they felt this is not right for Britain.
Yeah,
I mean, that doesn't mean that he's not still, in a way, connected to these campaigns over there. But I think that would be really worth looking into. And I think the Nathan Gill story could be a good start for that.
Quiet Riot.
Netflix has a new, monstrous story to tell. In 1950s Wisconsin, Ed Gein lived quietly on a decaying farm, hiding a house of horrors so gruesome it would redefine the American nightmare. Driven by isolation, psychosis, and an all-consuming obsession with his mother, he committed crimes that would haunt Hollywood for decades. The third and most harrowing installment of Ryan Murphy and Ian Brennan's anthology series. Watch Monster, the Ed Gein story, October 3rd, only on Netflix.
Quiet Riot.
I have taken the view for some years, and I've received much vitriol from the political establishment for saying it, but whatever we think of Assad, whatever we think of Putin, and I would not be inviting them round to meet Mum this afternoon for tea, but whatever we think of them, on the biggest threat we face, namely global jihadism, we need to recognise we're actually on the same side.
I mean, Alex, what's the score here? Why are we in this country so reticent when it comes to looking at Russian interference?
It feels like it's too big a story. That's what it feels like to me. It feels like there are so many tentacles to this that everyone is afraid to touch it. Yeah. Because actually uncovering it might give Putin what he wants anyway by destabilizing the system completely. Because I'm sure they will find links to politicians of every party. Yeah. I'm sure they will find links to respected organizations and think tanks and things like that. I'm sure they will find links to Brexit, which then opens again like a huge can of worms. If this was a decision that was somehow interfered with and won by such a narrow margin, where are we? It reminds me of the way British people deal with the situation in Northern Ireland, that from a point onwards, they just started referring to it as the Troubles.
Yeah.
The Troubles, this generic phrase that lets you not look at anything that happened, not apportion any blame.
It's also really difficult to prove, because a lot was online and a lot had to do with data manipulation, like in Moldova.
Yeah.
I mean, Putin put in 200 million euros, apparently, into bribery, direct bribery that's easier to prove, but also disinformation online, up to bomb threats at foreign embassies. I mean, the Brussels embassy of Moldova had to be evacuated on voting day because there were bomb threats, because he tried to intimidate mostly Moldovan expats because they obviously would not vote for Russian-affiliated parties.
In Greece, there was a huge problem with tax evasion, not avoidance too, but evasion. The moment that started to change is when Greek authorities adopted this policy called pothen esches, which means instead of trying to trace the money as it makes its way in, you trace what it buys.
Right.
You go to someone and you say, this house and this car, how did you buy them?
Output rather than input.
Do you see what I mean? Yeah. Show us where that money came in and that you paid tax on it. And I think that is a better way to cover political funding, actually, to say, let's look at your expenditure and trace where all this money came from. Let's look at your travel. Let's look at where you're staying. That seems to me a better way to go about it. But we can't go on pretending this isn't happening. That just seems unhealthy to me, to not acknowledge that there are people from both West and East actively trying to sabotage our democratic processes. When the world's richest man that owns one of the biggest social media platforms appears on a big screen at a far-right march and says, overthrow the government, this deserves more than a shrug of the shoulders, right?
Yeah, and as Ed Miliband said, why is the government still on X? I mean, that's something I really don't understand.
No,
they should leave that platform.
They have to. Yeah. They must.
I find it fascinating how this conversation in the space of less than 5 minutes has twisted, because the question was, why are we reticent about looking at Russian interference? And it's not Russian interference. It's interference by powerful, wealthy people, some of whom happen to be in Russia or have very strong links to Russia, some of whom are on the other side of the Atlantic. And we know that there is a tangled web of finance that goes on there. We know that it's being funneled into British politics. We know that places like, GB News could be named. It's a very useful way of importing finances from who knows where.
And it's also happening in plain sight. I mean, J.D. Vance wasn't here for holiday. They are financing the AfD. I mean, what they want is a regime change in Europe. Yeah. They want to sort of disable the thought of liberal democracy because it's too controlling and too much red tape for them. And, and I've just talked to a colleague in Germany who does a portrait on one of the very prominent AfD people who've just been to America. And he came back and said she had directly talked about how to derail EU regulation on data. And they have more or less told her they will not support the AfD if they don't go with that. So it's very direct.
Oh, very, very.
And it's very, very much, in plain sight. It's not even hidden. I mean, the American influence, at least, at the moment.
Yeah.
Another thing that I like is that when we read in our history books about the CIA's influence over the years in foreign countries, we tend to go, oh, how did they fall for that? The buffoons. Oh, whoops. Same tricks. Same tricks, bigger figures this time. And bigger danger as a result as well.
Yeah, and a more diffuse network through which to channel it, which makes it all the more interesting. Annette, the Moldovan election, do you think that is a battle in a larger war that's been won? Or did we just dodge a bullet temporarily, basically?
I think the latter for now. I mean, Putin has quite the staying power, as we all know. And even if he's doing relatively badly at the moment and can't really make any real advances in Ukraine, he keeps going. And I think Maia Sandu is a very brave politician. It's an astonishing win she brought in as an incumbent against all odds and against the 200 million worth Russian interference to win an absolute majority.
In a small country.
In a small country that is completely unstable as well. I mean, they have had, I don't know how many Ukrainian refugees, because they're the front state to Ukraine. I mean, they're this little thing, sandwich squeezed in between Romania and Ukraine. So that's why it's such an important election, because it's a country as big as Wales. I mean, it would normally not be a big story, but in Brussels, people were really, really nervous about these elections because they thought if that goes wrong, then Russia, Ukraine and the front will come even closer to Europe. So it was a very crucial election, and it's astounding. I mean, as an incumbent, to get an absolute majority in such difficult times where...
It felt like their Euromaidan moment.
It was a bit like that. And also, I mean, you have to think that the interesting thing about Moldova is that a lot of their people have left the country because they could apply for Romanian statehood because it's such an intermingled, I mean, that Romanians live in Moldova and vice versa. So a lot of Moldovan have left the country via Romania and are now EU citizens, while they have lots of Ukrainian refugees. I think the highest per capita in all of Europe. So it's a country in a very difficult situation. They're very unstable, and that is absolutely astounding that they all, I mean, that such a clear majority voted for a party that wants to stay out of Russia in spite of Russia being so close. I mean, it's quite interesting, but I do not think it's they need to get accepted into the EU now as soon as possible. Maia Sandu has promised that for 2030. And von der Leyen, when they were very much relieved after the election, said, no, we're on track and we will do this. But as we all know,
because otherwise they leave them very vulnerable.
Of course, right? I mean that's how Sandu won the vote, because the EU politicians came to Moldova before the election and sort of reinforced the promise to advance that and do it as quickly as possible. I think that has to really happen. But as we know, these accession talks are very difficult and very complicated and can take a long time, and all is not well. I mean, there's a lot of corruption as well. So this is sort of it's a bullet we dodged. It's good. It's really good news. But it's
but we need to press the advantage
exactly.
now.
That has to be pressed now.
The change of position in Ukraine, I think, also seems to have been a real one, rhetorically at least. You know, we don't know what will happen in practical terms, but at the time of recording, Trump hasn't done his usual thing of taking it all back, you know, and changing his position. My question is, this leaves Putin in Ukraine in a position where he has to accept some kind of defeat, it seems to me. So what is, if you go by the Sun Tzu military strategy, what golden bridge have we built for our enemy to retreat through? Do you see what I mean? Has there been enough thought about what might allow Putin to present this, at least internally, as not a terrible thing, a terrible mistake to have made?
I think there is none at the moment. And I don't think Putin will change track at all. I mean, what has changed is Trump's attitude towards him. Because at this UN assembly, he was clearly suddenly changing gears. I mean, he was suddenly saying maybe Putin is a loser. I mean, he didn't say that openly, but that, to me, it seemed, because he just came from Britain, from his golden carriage playground thing in Windsor. And
we know Charles spoke to him about
Ukraine. Yes, he very clearly spoke to him. And Keir Starmer has spoken to him, and there were talks behind the scenes. I mean, this is pure speculation, obviously, because nobody will tell us journalists. But I had the feeling when I saw that, I thought, maybe they have managed to tell the story that Putin is a loser. Because he is, in a way. He hasn't really made any big wins. No. I mean, he's still carrying out mostly attacks on civilian houses. It's basically terrorism. It's not really a war he's winning, if you like. So I think that has changed. But also at the same time, Trump, when he was here in this long rambling monologue at the press conference with Starmer, he was clearly saying, but this doesn't really affect us as the US. This is something far away for us. I mean, that was a clear hint. I mean, the US will stay out of that. And when he said in New York, just if there is a Russian plane coming into Poland, just shoot it down. He didn't really say that the US would support, as a NATO member, the shooting down. And that's something I find really important. Okay,
that's true, but at least he's not actively on the other side at the moment. which is an improvement, though, from where we were, right?
But it doesn't really help Europe, because Europe isn't ready to defend itself against Putin.
No, but it is getting there.
Yeah, but that takes at least till 2028-9. If you talk to defense experts, it will take a long time. And if Putin is clever, he will start that earlier.
The thing is, that depends actually partly on the situation in Ukraine, because, and I found this quite an eye-opening thing. Arthur Snell on Behind the Lines was talking about this, and he has mentioned this a couple of times, but it really, really sunk in. Ukraine has developed such huge capacity now for manufacturing.
They will sell us arms.
Absolutely.
Yeah, no,
it's not only that, but also they have the largest and most experienced army in the world right now. You know, so they can train up and tool up Europe to be in a much stronger position if we can manage to
save them.
If we can manage to engineer a situation where not everything has to go in that direction.
That's a really interesting development. Also, they've managed to build drones in a very creative, cheap and cheerful way, which Europe has always been very much slow to do.
Do you know the one thing that Ukraine does not have an excess of? Fat generals. They're so far ahead of the game, aren't they?
I mean, honestly, that thing.
I mean, that was just surreal.
Yeah, surreal. But it was, on Sunday, I speculated that it was Hegseth launching his primary. I think the grassroots MAGA element doesn't like J.D. Vance. They see him as a rich people's puppet. And I think they're grooming Hegseth as the sort of real MAGA.
Good luck with that.
Candidate. But, you know. Has NATO and the EU reaction been sufficiently robust on recent incursions? I know we were having a conversation earlier, Annette, and you were telling me that relations among EU member states are not as harmonious as they could be on this.
I mean, it's a big problem, especially between Germany and Poland. I think overall, just to answer your first question, I think this was not an Article 5 case for NATO. So the reaction, I thought, overall was appropriate to not shoot anything down for now. But Sikorski, the Polish foreign minister, made it very clear that next time we will shoot you down. He said that in New York at the UN Assembly. So I think that was appropriate. That was Putin testing things out, but it might have helped to, I think especially Sikorski's reaction might have made it very clear that this cannot go on forever. So for now, it seems to be a bit quieter. Apart from that, especially, and Poland is such an important state here because they are the country in the EU, within the EU who is basically having a thriving economy, who is able to put up an army and who has massively invested in defense because they know what they're dealing with Russia. Whereas Germany has been very slow and is still very slow. And what is a problem at the moment is that Germany and Poland have a really bad relationship, or not as good as it should be, as neighbors and as two of the biggest states within the EU, which might be problematic in the future. And that has mostly to do also, again, with the German chancellor being not very inept when it comes to dealing with Poland and the Polish-German past. That is still a bit an unresolved wound, and not very well healed wound, especially on the Polish side. I mean, the Poles never got, in their view, enough reparations from Germany for all the destruction. This is a story. I mean, especially the nationalists, the peace, the nativists, who now have one of their guys as the new Polish president again, Nawrocki. They have brought that up again and again, and Germany is always saying, la, 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 we don't hear anything, and do not even engage with that, which is not clever. And at the same time, and that's part of Merz's wrong policy in my perspective, to how he tried to appease the AfD atmosphere in Germany by tightening up the border controls within Europe. And he does that mostly between Germany and Poland at the moment. So there is massive German police force on the German side.
So it's almost like he's un-Schengen.
He's un-Schengen. I mean, that is a big problem. That is something he did against EU law, which doesn't make any sense really, because, I mean, he just promised that in the election campaign. And then after the election, he came in and then he had to do something because he promised that. Yeah. So he couldn't do that because it's against EU law, because we have freedom of movement within the EU. So what did he do? He declared a state of emergency, which there is not. On the contrary.
It's quite Trumpian, actually.
It's very Trumpian. That's what I'm saying. He's weak and he doesn't think things through. Because there is no state of emergency. On the contrary, the immigration asylum applications have halved over the last 10 years, and especially over the last 2 years. They're down 60%. So there's several lawsuits now it's a bit like Rwanda, that will probably turn this whole thing down. While this is still lingering at the courts, these things take time. There is lots of police and soldiers and whatever at the borders. And if he keeps doing that, he doesn't only ruin the relationship with Poland, because they feel this is a very hostile thing that they get controlled every time they want to get into Germany. There's almost a million Poles working in Germany that cross the border. When the German goes into Poland, there's nothing, because
there's no
this
problem.
is just not clever at all, and this destroys sort of this very, very important feeling of unity, solidarity.
And I think that is what Putin is taking advantage of, because actually the Russian economy is in a terrible state. And what seems to be lacking is to deny the hope to Putin that in the future somehow, there will be a falling out among EU states, and he will manage it. The moment I think the West speaks genuinely with one voice and seems united,
we're much stronger
about it, I think he will have no choice, actually, but
that's sort of
negotiate.
The stupidity of a German chancellor, I mean, to be very blunt here, to not understand that and to not see that he needs to be generous and forthcoming towards Poland. I mean, they are in a much more dangerous position as well. And instead of, he could have done something way more solid. I mean, that would be much better received if, for example, he would have put up German-Polish forces at the border and do it together. Or send German soldiers to the outer border with Belarus. That is a real problem for Poland, because Putin and Belarus are basically sending refugees there through as weapons. I mean, it's a hybrid warfare that's going on with these people, poor people there. So this has all been really not helpful. And I really hope that, that especially the German government will help Poland more and be a bit more forthcoming, because otherwise, in the next elections, Tusk will lose. And then we have a PiS government again, which is weirdly for Poland, partly pro-Russian now as well.
So this week's call to action is a familiar one to those of you who know and love us all. If you want to help smart medical aid to Ukraine, Google them. Log on, see what they do, send them a few quid if you can, give them your support. They're doing good work out there and they need our help.
Quiet Riot.
Okay, listeners, you've stuck with us with some pretty heavyweight stuff today, and I think you might welcome a brief bit of good news to finish things off. So let's lighten your load with a bit of good news. It's time to grin and share it.
Good news is welcome to me. Bad news is hell come to me. Good news. I want good news.
What have you got for us, Kenny?
Well, here's some medical science news that doesn't involve sticking needles in anybody's arse or memorising a periodic table. There's a new study out this week from UC Davis in California. Now, they tracked 13,000 adults. So this is a big old survey, big piece of work. And they tracked them for up to 15 years. So there's a massive data crunch going on with these people. Why were they doing that? Well, they found that people with a sense of purpose... Exactly. Alex is looking perplexed, but that's what they were researching. Does a sense of purpose make any difference to your life, to your longevity? They found that people with a sense of purpose were about 28% less likely to develop dementia. Well, these are statistically significant figures. So living with meaning isn't just good for the soul. Apparently, it's like a gym membership for your brain as well. So here's where it gets even more interesting. This effect held up across all ethnicities, all education levels as well. Even people with, I'll probably mispronounce this, but the APOE4 gene, that's essentially the bad luck gene for Alzheimer's. Mm-hmm. Okay, you don't want that one. And in other words, so if you're genetically doomed, you might still get a brain-boosting reprieve just by giving your life a bit of a point. Hallelujah. So here's the thing. As a listener to this podcast, the chances are that you're a bit of a Remainer, for example. You know?
Really?
Who would have thought it? Plenty of you went in those marches.
Are we heading in the direction where we say that...
Don't spoil the surprise, Alex.
Quiet Riot.
Plenty of you went on the marches. Alex has probably seen where this is going, isn't it? You're engaged with pro-European organisations. You give a damn about something. You give a damn about the importance of Europe, of friendship, of partnership. Otherwise, you wouldn't be listening, let's face it. So if this research is right, and Lord knows I want this research to be right, then being purposefully engaged in this way and refusing to give up could literally help you fight off dementia. So forget fancy medications that cost a fortune, give you side effects worse than the disease itself. Purpose is free, safe, and comes in flavours like play with the grandkids, take up knitting, or become overly competitive when it comes to building bridges with Britain's European cousins. Here's the kicker. This means that you can, in effect, think yourself healthier. Just by living with purpose, you're nudging your neurons into resilience mode. So yeah, purpose in life might be the cheapest prescription out there. Find a reason to get up in the morning and your brain might just stick around to enjoy it. How brilliant is that?
That is good news. I understand the word overly and competitive separately, but not together. I never had us down as being a well-being podcast, but I fully embrace the results of the research. Thank you, Kenny. And we'll drop a link in the show notes so that you can not just grin, but also share it.
Quiet Riot.
So with that bit of relatively uplifting news, we bring this week's show to a close. All that remains is for us to give a huge thank you to Annette.
Pleasure.
For joining us.
As always.
Thank you.
If we've left you better informed and less enraged, then our work is done. And if you can afford it, head on over to ko-fi.com/quietriotpod and support us for as little as £5 a month to help us make this show sustainable and keep it free at the point of consumption.
We will, of course, be back at the weekend with our regular Sunday school, but until then, stay safe, stay sassy, stay purposefully engaged, and stay quietly riotous.
We love you lots and we're good for your brain. Bye.
Bye-bye.
Quiet Riot is an audio production by Cooler Heads with Naomi Smith and Andreou. Produced by Kenny Campbell. Music by Mariana Sangeeta. Artwork by Simona Canelu. And edited by me, Alex Reese. Quiet Riot is a co-production with Soundstone Global.
Quiet Riot.
Can you just take his mic down completely, please?
And insert it where the sun don't shine.
Just to 0.